organizational structure was established at camp. And that was the team then that was going to operate the troop in its patrol structure back in the city. And the very reason why the family camp was built was to enable scoutmasters who were giving up their vacations to bring their families here and at least have the families available, but to preserve the integrity and the continuity of troop leadership. It wasn't built there just as a nice place. It was built for the purpose of procuring and building sound troop leadership on a continuity basis. Always the purpose and the function ahead of the physical property and ahead of the pattern of behavior in the staff and in the troops and on the reservation. And that was the critical thing.
I at this point have to mention that unless I hear distant thunder, I think Boots' stomach is growling. So we're going to be cutting this off in a few minutes. We're approaching dinner, and I would like to surprise each of you, I guess, with a question. If you could tell a brief story about the person on your right and a brief story about your favorite experience at Many Point. And let's start down with Orly. And you'll have to think about Boots. You'll have to tell a story about Boots.
Yeah, where are you going?
Keep in mind we are going to eat this evening.
There's such a wealth of things, I don't know where to begin or end.
Can I tell about him?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
He came up here, I think Brownie came with him, and I think it was Scotty. And I lived across the lake. And he thought I was nuts to try to build a camp out of this wilderness. Maybe I was. And that one night, let's go up to the store up on Elbow Lake, so we went up there. And the first thing Orly did was pick up a grapefruit and started playing baseball with it. And then we came back home, and I don't know what you guys did. I went to bed. But the people up there thought we were nuts driving up there and playing baseball with their grapefruits.
Orly, that brings something to mind?
Yeah, I think probably my favorite thing about this, and the thing that over the years I've appreciated most, is that in that first year, Boots and Wint came to me and they said, you know, this was at the start, the very first year, the very first session, and they said, you know, this is really tough, and you got to do something dramatic that will grab these people and shape their attitudes and their initiatives and so forth. And so Boots and I got our heads together, and he noticed that I was wearing this old ivory harpoon point. And we kicked it around a bit, and from that, Boots went and he carved out pine blanks. And in those first sessions, all of the troops were known as the spearhead troops at this camp. And every staff member and every leader and every kid carved his own spear point. And he wore it. And then Boots took me out here, and if some of you want to go tomorrow morning, we'll go and find Secret Hill. Secret Hill is a special place out there, just above the Little Beaver. And that's where we had our goodbyes.
You talk about Secret Hill. Orly came to me one day and he said, we got to put on a real demonstration out there. And he's one of these guys that when you build a campfire, it ain't a little one, it's this high, big thing. And he said, we want something real spectacular. He said, what can you come up with? I just the idea. So we built this fire, and we run a copper tube from the center of this council fire back into the woods, the pump can. And a given signal, when the fire was just about all done, he made his speech and all this stuff. He gave me the high sign, and I poked this gun, and whoosh, 2 gallons of gas went up in the air. It's the biggest flame you ever saw.
Incidentally, we gathered all the troops in the old parking lot up there, and in a very winding way through the ridges back there in the woods, while we had torches and a long single line of kids go back through there at night. There's no way to find your way out. Remember that thing? Find their way out to Secret Hill and then find their way back. Nobody knew where that place was. 2 months ago, I had a guy downtown walk up to me and throw his arms around me and say, "Orly!" He was a kid that tried over 5 consecutive camp seasons to find where that Secret Hill was. And that was the thing that he remembered, was when we said goodbye to the Spearhead troops.
Boots, do you have a brief story about Wint?
You
Remember, this
you
is
don't want to
on
tell
tape.
anything about me.
I can't lie. No, Wint and I got along, we would argue on different points, but we never left the table until one of us got the
He
one
drank too
out.
much coffee.
I know one time we were arguing down here at the garage, and I wasn't going to give in till I proved to him that my theory was the best. And he says, "Okay, let's do it your way." And this is the way we did it. We had something, we sat down. I know one day I was down by we had a work crew up here or something. We were down by the trading post. And I started to do something. He said, "You know, I didn't hire you to work. I hired you to get this done." And but I told him, I said, I wasn't born that way. I have to work too. So we got along fine. Sure, we had our arguments, but one of us won out.
Brent, do you
One
have a
was
couple
over
of more
there.
feet left on the tape?
Oh,
Because
certainly.
I think that there's one thing that's important in this good record that the Campbell Staff Alumni Association is making that needs documentation, it needs a matter of record, and that's about Hartman. Who was Hartman? And a lot of my associates on the board, when we first started talking about Hartman, they'd never heard the word before, never heard the name. Win Hartman was a kid in a little small town in western Minnesota. Scrawny guy, as you'll see in the old pictures. Came to this big, sophisticated, very, very dramatic kind of a camp called Tonkawa. And it was a mass camp. And he grew up in that environment. But he also got a pretty good education, and he was an innovator. And Wint knew of some of us independent troops, because I wasn't even a part of the council. I just had an independent troop all my own. And he saw this independent troop thing, and he began to experiment with it at Isle of Pines. And tonight at the dinner, I'll tell an experience on him about Isle of Pines. He wasn't all that great at the board of directors. And he experimented with troop camping and with its purposes and what it could do for the stability and long-range development of a council. And then he had this dream. And it was Wint that had these ideas, and it put the rest of us into the groove. When Wint went from here, he went, and I don't have the sequence correct, but he did the same thing that you see here at Philadelphia, at Wilmington and the Delmarva Peninsula with the DuPont money. He did it in Chicago. He did it in New York. And at least 3 of those facilities in American camping, based on this proposition, were approximately 5 to 8 to 10 times the size of this one. And this was Hartman in the national scene taking this experience abroad through the whole eastern half of the United States, which camping propositions then propagated themselves into what we see today in American camping out there. He was viewed as an innovator and sometimes as a radical and sometimes to be somebody very feared on the part of the American Camping Association. He was a member of the national staff. He was the key director of camping for the national staff for many years. And what he did and learned here goes on forever. That's Hartman.
That's quite a testimonial, Wint. Do you have a few words about Maury?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about that first season. In fact, as we rode up here this afternoon, I was relating to Orly a walk that across the lawn, that's using the term generously, the lawn of the administration building. When we were within 3 days of opening the camp, and the contractor was behind, and it was raining, and we had all of these troubles, and the floor of the administration building hadn't yet been poured. There was just dirt there, and as Maury told you, they poured the floor just before the kids came in, and I remember it because Maury, we had been going over a lot of these things, and he said to me as we walked across the lawn going back to our cabins, he said, and he should have known this because I was a camper when he was a staff member, he said, what kind of a guy are you? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you're so calm about this. Are you all churned up inside? And of course, we were all churned up a little bit inside. I want to tell you too, you know, a story about Siebert. Siebert, you know, has many skills, but among them is he's a great kidder. And there was a fellow by the name of Glenn Wallace, who was the architect who worked with us out here. And Glenn was a very nice guy, but he wasn't very used to the wilderness. And he made many contributions to what you see here. But one evening, we took Glenn Wallace and Siebert and I, and we went in a boat back into Fishhook Bay. We were going to take Glenn out to catch some panfish back there by the old railroad pilings. And as we got close to the pilings, why, a great big northern came up and swam with his fin out of the water right side of the boat. And Siebert grabbed an oar and jumped up and threw it down in the water like that. And of course, this fish was long gone by the time the oar hit the water. But Siebert looked at Glenn Wallace and he says, "By golly, I tell you, it's dangerous out here."
Well, Maury, that may be a tough act to follow, but do you have a story about Siebert?
No, frankly, I never got to know Siebert too well, but he was so busy doing his thing, and I was so busy doing mine, and we never did get really very well acquainted. But I would like to tell you about another guy that worked here at the same time, an Indian by the name of John. Remember his last name? John. He worked around here all summer, and the last day, the day everybody's going to leave, I walked into the administration building, and he was in there building a fire. And I said, well, good morning, John. Nice day out, isn't it? It was a little bit cloudy or something. And he says, no, it's the other way around, excuse me. He said, well, it's going to rain, that was it. And I said, well, is that so? I wasn't interested really in what he thought about the weather, but he went out and he got the fire building, he went out, and he no sooner got out, come back in again. And he says, me no good weather prophet, it's raining.
Well,
I thought that was pretty good for an Indian, you know, to get all the weather.
thought he would know the weather. Well, Siebert, you've taken a couple of shots over here, an expression that's dated to this period in time of tape. Do you have a comment about one of these gentlemen to get even?
Oh, yeah, a couple of them.
Oh, this.
Can I tell that?
Oh, sure. This is,
Did
remember
you
this
hear
is,
the one about when Wade Hartman and Thornsjo went to Europe on their vacation?
no, could you tell,
And they landed in Paris, and they were walking along there, so they came to one of those cafes where they serve meals out on the cement walk, you know, table and everything. You know. Told you he said to Wade, it'd be fun to have dinner here. So, yeah, they sit down, they ordered dinner, and this guy came, took the order, and amongst what they ordered was a bowl of soup. And they start to eat, and they start to wait, and it took them half an hour to eat the soup. That's all, I got to eat them both of them.
That's
You certainly
102 years
did.
old.
Well, gentlemen, I, on behalf of the nearly 1,700 staff members that have followed you and the tens of thousands of scouts that have enjoyed very meaningful experiences at Many Point, I'd like to thank you for what you did and what you continue to do.
It's easy, just never lose sight of your
Tell
dreams.
us a story. Thank you very